Hi, I'm Adelpha. My sister invited me to her big celebration 2 days before the event, with a fake smile and a printed name tag that wasn't even mine. She told the room I was a pianist. Then she dared me to prove it publicly, under lights, in heels, in front of strangers who only knew me as her quiet sister. But that wasn't the real humiliation. The real pain came from the years of silence, the scholarship she quietly ruined, the piano she claimed as core, the father who never looked up when I walked in. So why did I sit down at that piano that night? Why did I let the room go silent on her terms and end it on mine? And what did they see that made her reputation fall apart, right there under the chandelier? Let me tell you. I arrived just late enough for it to be noticed, but not late enough to be excused. My heels struck the marble too sharply, a click-click that echoed like I'd barged in uninvited. Everyone else looked as if they'd stepped out of a lifestyle shoot: beige linens, gold accents, perfect posture. I had ironed my dress myself, a navy blue sheath I'd worn to a colleague's retirement dinner 6 months ago. The email invitation had come only 2 nights before. No call, no follow-up. Just a subject line from Zinnia's assistant. Private wellness night family spotlight. I paused at the entryway, half hoping no one had noticed. They had. A woman in stilettos I didn't recognize gave me the up-down look before returning to her flute of sparkling cider. I wasn't on the guest list, not really. I was a prop. And I knew it before I stepped all the way inside. The last time Zinnia had hosted one of these healing gatherings, she forgot to mention it was being live-streamed. I had found out because someone tagged me in a cliffer, calling me the quiet one with potential who prefers the shadows. It wasn't meant to hurt, I'm sure. That's the thing with her, it never is. As I scanned the room, my eyes found my father. Sitting beside Zinnia, his napkin folded precisely on his lap, his glass half full of something dark. He didn't look my way, didn't acknowledge my entrance. Not a smile, not a nod, not even the awkward glad you came face. He used to text me reminders about family events. Now I was lucky to find out through automated calendar invites. My name card was tucked at the far end of the long banquet table, close to the server's station. It read, Jessica, the performer. Jessica. I hadn't been called that in years. It was a joke from when we were kids. Zinnia used to say I looked like a Jessica who cried when the spotlight dimmed. It stung then. It stung now. As I took my seat, someone 2 places down leaned toward their partner and whispered just loud enough for the words to carry. Oh, so she is real. Zinnia's voice chimed from across the room. Oh, the name mix-up? Inside joke. You'll see. Laughter fluttered around her like flies. Even the server cracked a smile. I kept mine in place, my jaw still, my spine stiff. This wasn't new. It was just more public. The wine was chilled. At least they got that right. She stood for her toast about 20 minutes, imperfectly timed, as always, to land right before dessert. Thank you all for joining me on this night of light, healing, and alignment, she began, her hands open like she was addressing a congregation. We're here not just to celebrate my journey, but to honor the people who made it possible. She gestured toward my father. My rock. He smiled reserved, respectful. Then her gaze drifted, settled on me. And tonight, I'm blessed to have my baby sister here. You may not know, but she used to be quite the pianist. A few polite chuckles. My fork halted mid-slice through a piece of grilled peach. She hasn't played in years, Zinnia continued, but I have a feeling the right encouragement might do the trick. The lights didn't dim, but the air did. That subtle shift where laughter stops just shy of cruel and lands right at expectant. It would mean the world to me, she said, if she'd share something with us. Right, everyone? Applause. Not raucous, but supportive enough to trap me. My hands went clammy. I glanced at the piano-centered, lit, waiting. Of course, it was already mixed. My throat tightened. I hadn't played in public since our mother's funeral. I tried to get through Claire de Lune. I had made it 2 minutes before the sob hit, and I had to stop. Zinnia's eyes locked onto mine. That looked sweet on the outside, firm underneath. She was daring me to say no. I could feel my heartbeat at the base of my skull. Someone near the back muttered, "She'll probably say no." Would be typical. I stood. Not to play. Not this time. I walked past the piano, heels tapping softer now, toward the source of the invitation. I walked toward my sister. I didn't hesitate as I made my way across the room. Not toward the piano, but straight to Zinnia. The silence that followed me wasn't polite, it was expectant, curious, waiting for something dramatic. I wasn't giving them drama. I was giving them a boundary. Zinnia turned as I approached, lifting her glass like we were old friends. "Oh, are you going to honor us after all?" she said, her tone soft but sharp, syrup over steel. I leaned in just enough so only she could hear me. "No," I said quietly. "I just came to say don't ever volunteer me for your performances again." Her smile held. It always did. But I saw the flicker in her eyes, that brief moment when someone realizes they've lost control, even if just for a beat. I didn't wait for her response. I turned before she could compose one. Instead of heading for the door, I slipped to the edge of the room and found a chair by a large floral arrangement. It smelled too sweet artificial, cloying, but it offered cover. I needed a moment. I needed to not be watched. It hurt more than I expected. Not the public call-out that was Zinnia's style, but the private sting, that was mine alone, because part of me, despite everything, had thought maybe, just maybe she meant it. Maybe she wanted to reconnect. Maybe this was a strange olive branch. The foolish part of me still wanted to be invited genuinely, not staged like a magic trick. I glanced down the banquet table. My place card still sat there, tipped against a gold napkin ring. I hadn't noticed it clearly before. Now that I looked, I wished I hadn't. Jessica the performer. Jessica. No one in this family ever called me that, except Zinnia. When we were little, she made it up, Jessica the just a backup. It started as a joke after Id played second violin in a school recital. She made the name stick, using it anytime I tried to shine. And now here it was, printed in script on thick cardstock like a branding. I picked it up and turned it in my hand. My name wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. A waiter passed nearby, and I waved him over. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Was there a mix-up with the place cards?" He looked at the name tag, then at me. "No, ma'am. Miss Zinnia provided all the guest names personally. She even mentioned you'd be doing a surprise piece, said it was part of the program." He walked off before I could respond. A flush started in my chest and worked its way up to my ears. It wasn't just public. It wasn't spontaneous. This was planned. From the printed name to the piano to the timing, it was all laid out in advance, like a show, like a spectacle. I looked at the piano again. It sat perfectly lit, a soft white glow highlighting its curves like it belonged on stage. Which, of course, it did. Zinnia didn't pick things by accident. That piano wasn't part of the venue. It had been brought in, delivered, placed, tuned. We used to have a baby Steinway in the house when we were kids. Aunt Lorraine gifted it to me when I turned 12. I practiced on it for hours after school, the ivory keys always slightly yellowed, one pedal forever sticking. I found out 2 years ago that Zinnia had it moved to her new home in Austin for aesthetic reasons. Now it sat in the background of her live videos, more prop than instrument. The piano tonight was different, but the message was the same. This isn't yours. This isn't for you. I stood and walked slowly back toward the table, not for the performance, but for clarity, for truth. As I passed by the guests, I felt their eyes shift with mesome curious, some politely avoiding. My wine was still at my seat, now room temperature. I didn't sip. I just set it aside. I didn't feel small anymore. Angry, yes. Tired, absolutely. But not small. Something inside me had hardened. Or maybe it had sharpened. Either way, it was ready. If Zinnia wanted to make me a show, she'd learn that I picked my own spotlight. I moved toward the piano, not to sit, not yet. I brushed my fingertips across its surface. It was cool, impersonal. The edge caught the light. I didn't play, but I let them wonder. A voice near the front whispered, "Is she going to do it?" I didn't answer. I just smiled, calm, unreadable, and held that silence as long as I pleased. The crowd behind me had quieted, unsure of what to make of my retreat. I stood just to the side of the grand piano, letting the stage lights wash over me, not as a performer, but as someone reclaiming space. My fingertips hovered just above the keys, close enough to feel the coolness, far enough not to trigger sound. "This isn't mine," I whispered to myself. I wasn't talking about the instrument. Not really. The last time I'd touched a piano under pressure like this, I was 19. It was the final round for the Regional Arts Scholarship in Dallas, a small but prestigious award. The conservatory panel had flown in from out of state. I wore a black dress that made me feel older, more confident. I had practiced the same Debussy piece for months. When the results were posted on a corkboard outside the audition hall, my name wasn't there. At first, I thought it was a clerical mistake, but then I received a formal letter stating I'd been disqualified due to plagiarism allegations, claims that I had submitted a piece of music not composed by me in a previous round. I hadn't. It was an original arrangement, handwritten, reviewed by my teacher. The letter had been sent anonymously. Weeks later, after digging I never wanted to do, a friend in tech traced it to an old email. Zinnia's. I never confronted her. I never had to. When I told her about the disqualification, she didn't even blink. She just patted my shoulder and said, "Some things aren't meant to be long-term. It's okay." That was her way of smoothing over disaster-acknowledging damage without admitting the match in her hand. Back in the present, I could feel my jaw tighten. I stepped back from the piano and looked around the room. People were murmuring again. A few had their phones out, half raised, waiting. Always waiting. Not for music, but for a moment that might make them feel superior. I spotted Wardell near the buffet table, a glass in his hand, his back straight, his posture pristine. My father hadn't moved an inch since the speech. He hadn't even turned when I approached the piano, hadn't tilted his head in recognition. He was too busy nodding politely to someone in a gray suit. He'd always been like that, present, but never with me. When I was younger, I thought if I played well enough, performed perfectly enough, he'd finally say something that sounded like pride. But his version of parenting was about image, not involvement. And if things weren't pleasant, they didn't exist. Zinnia, standing near the bar, still watched me. She was smiling again. She always smiled when she thought she was winning. I took one step back from the piano, then another. Not in retreat, just enough to signal something was done. The whispers grew. Someone leaned toward their friend and asked, "Is she okay?" Another said, "Is she crying?" I wasn't. I was deciding. My heel tapped once against the stage flooring, not nervously, deliberately. Then I turned not toward the keys, but toward the corridor that led to the terrace. I didn't glance back at Zinnia or anyone else. I didn't offer explanations. I let their confusion grow roots. As I passed the raised dais where Zinnia had given her speech, I paused, my back to the room, my voice clear and controlled. "You set the stage, Zinnia," I said. "But I decide what gets played." I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just kept walking past the tall glass doors, out toward the soft spill of outdoor lights, where the night air didn't judge me and no one expected me to be anything I wasn't. The terrace was quieter than I expected, perched above the murmurs of the party like a balcony from a different world. The stone ledge under my palms was cool, but my back still held the heat of the stage lights, like a memory refusing to let go. A few wine glasses, half full and abandoned, lined the railing spectators to everything unspoken. Above, the string lights danced with the wind, flickering like they too were unsure whether to laugh or cry. I had come out here to breathe, not hide-breathe, but I should have known better. Zinnia never missed an encore. I heard her before I saw her, the precise rhythm of her heels against the tile, a practiced walk that carried both elegance and authority. Then the soft swirl of rose in her glass, like she wanted me to know she was calm, in control, unbothered, always unbothered. "You handled that?" "Unexpectedly," she said. Her tone dipped in sugar, but sharpened like a knife. I didn't respond. I let the silence stretch out long enough for it to start making her uncomfortable. She hated silence. She filled it compulsively, like a child afraid of the dark. She tried again. "I mean, no need to get all dramatic. It was just a little spotlight fun." I turned to face her, and there it was, that curated smile. Chin tilted, teeth flawless, eyes just wide enough to look sincere. It was the same expression she wore when addressing donors or faking laughter at charity luncheons. Polished, public, performed. But I wasn't the audience tonight. Still, she kept the act going. "Adelpha," she said, voice sweet with a bitter aftertaste, "you're not going to make a scene out here, are you?" Then, a beat lower, calculated, intimate, meant to wound. "Just don't embarrass us again, please." Again. That word cracked something inside me, clean and quiet. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just let out a single breath of laughter. It wasn't joy or humor. It was release, like letting out air from a balloon that had been straining too long to stay inflated. The memories came flooding in, one by one. 13 years old. My voice cracked during a school recital. Zinnia clapped louder than anyone else, mocking applause, standing and hollering, "Well, at least she tried." 20, at our mother's funeral. I sat frozen, paralyzed by grief, a folded speech trembling in my hand. I never got to read it. Zinnia stepped up instead, delivering the eulogy with perfect pacing, a voice break at just the right moment. People hugged her afterward. They said she was strong, brave. I was invisible. Every stumble it made, she had framed on social media, at dinner parties, even inside our own home. She painted them with humor, wrapped them in charm, and hung them up like family portraits. Her version of love had teeth, and an audience. I looked at her directly now, my voice calm, firm, sober. "You don't get to define what shame looks like anymore." Her smile twitched, her fingers tensed around the wine glass, and for a brief moment, I saw a hairline crack in the porcelain perfection she wore. "I didn't mean it that way," she said quickly. "You never do," I replied. Behind us, the sliding glass doors creaked open wider. The music inside had faded. Whether someone paused it or the moment simply swallowed it, I couldn't tell. But I felt the shift. A hush, a pause. People were watching, some leaning in doorways with their drinks half raised, others hovering at the edge of curiosity and concern, pretending not to eavesdrop, but they heard everything. Zinnia noticed too. She recalibrated instantly, her volume rising, her tone warmer, more theatrical. "Well," she laughed, "some people just aren't used to attention. It can be a bit overwhelming, right?" It was a safe line, carefully chosen, broad enough to diffuse tension, just ambiguous enough to leave interpretation open. But her eyes still burned. Then she stepped closer. Too close. Her voice dropped low again, just for me. "Play something now," she whispered, "or walk away looking like a coward. Your choice." And just like that, she stepped back, flashing a radiant smile for the audience now watching through glass and shadows. She was done. Her part delivered. Curtain down. I didn't move. I didn't give her what she wanted. I let the silence return, this time mine, not hers. Then, without raising my voice, I said, "If you keep pushing, Zinnia, I will respond. But not the way you expect." She froze. It wasn't visible to the casual observer. But I saw it, the smallest tremor in her wrist. The wine in her glass shivered ever so slightly. The bass tapped her bracelet with a faint chime, like a clock had started counting down. I walked back into that room as if I had never left, like the girl who had once been ignored. There had never stepped away. But everything about me had changed. Not just the way I moved, but the way I carried something now. A quiet certainty. A refusal to shrink. The room was alive with noise again. Forks scraped plates. Conversations tangled together like loose threads. Laughter floated above it, all sharp, too loud. I heard it. I felt it. But it didn't bother me this time. Let them watch. Let them wonder. I wasn't here to fade back into the wallpaper Zinnia had assigned me to. And then I saw it. Still. Untouched. The piano. Like it had been waiting not for a performer, but for a witness, a vessel, someone willing to speak without words. I didn't make a scene. I didn't ask for silence. I didn't demand anything. I simply moved forward, nudging the bench slightly with the edge of my foot, and lowered myself onto it. I exhaled once, only once. My right heel hovered on the pedal, toes poised. The other foot stayed planted. My fingers stretched out over the keys like they remembered something I didn't have to explain. No more trembling, no second guessing. The stage wasn't mine, but the story was. And then I looked up. Across the room, nestled into the cushion of familiarity, there he was. Orson, sitting beside her. Zinnia. Her arm curved along the back of his chair, like a claim staked years ago that she'd never had to revisit. She leaned in toward him with practiced ease, the way she always did when she wanted possession, mistaken for affection. His hand rested over hers, not gripping, not holding, just there. Enough to be seen. He looked up. Our eyes met. And this time, I didn't flinch. I didn't blink or break away. He did. He looked down. And with that, I let my hands fall. The first note whispered into the room, so soft it barely existed. Then another, and another, each one a thread pulled from somewhere far older than any grudge or rivalry. It wasn't grand. It wasn't meant to dazzle. There were no soaring crescendos or showy runs. It was memory, in sound. The conversations dulled. Utensils paused midair. Phones were lowered slowly, hesitantly. No one applauded. Not yet, but they listened. I played what I had never been allowed to say out loud. Each note carried something real. My mother humming while folding shirts on a rainy Sunday. The chipped ivory of the E-flat key we never got around to fixing. The summer I played through thunder because the storm outside matched the one inside. The scholarship that never came. The way silence had shaped me more than praise ever did. They hadn't asked to hear any of this, but they couldn't look away. And I wasn't playing for them. I wasn't playing for Zinnia or Orson or my parents or the neighbors with name tags who barely remembered me. I was playing for the girl who spent every lunch hiding in the stairwell, rewinding tapes just to hear something beautiful, for the girl who waited backstage while others collected trophies and who folded chairs in silence, for the girl who wasn't brave enough to ask why she was always second, always invisible, always less. I played for her, and with each passage, I let something go. A piece of shame, a knot of grief, a silence that had grown teeth. Soon, I couldn't see faces anymore. They softened into background noise. Zinnia was gone. Orson was gone. The room dissolved into breath and pressure and rhythm. My shoulders relaxed. My jaw loosened. My hands became my voice. And when the final note settled into the airlow, stretched out, aching, I let it linger. I didn't chase it with a flourish. I didn't bow or gesture. I just let it be. Silence answered back. Then, from the left side of the room, a single clap. Soft, uncertain. Another followed, then more. A ripple, not a wave, not a thunderclap, but real, earnest. Enough to say we saw that. I stood slowly. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt real, present. And that was enough. My eyes found her Zinnia. She wasn't clapping. Her hands were stiff in her lap, her expression unreadable. Orson leaned in and said something just beneath her ear. Her jaw clenched. She didn't move. But I saw it. Her hand twitched. Her grip on her wineglass tightened ever so slightly. Enough to say, she heard it too. She didn't look at me. But for the first time, I didn't need her to. The clapping ended too neatly, like someone pressed pause on a track they never really wanted to play. I stood by the piano, collecting the silence like change dropped on the floor. Zinnia's hands moved, but barely. A single belated clap. Her lips were stretched into something meant to be a smile, but her eyes told a different story. She wasn't clapping for me. She was clapping for control. The room shifted. Conversations picked up, quiet and cautious, like no one wanted to be the first to say what they were all thinking. A man near the buffet cleared his throat too loudly. Someone else knocked over a glass. I didn't have to guess what they were whispering about. It wasn't the performance, it was her reaction to it. She couldn't hide the unraveling this time, not behind the pastel lighting or the perfect tailoring, not behind the curated hashtags. Then, from the far side of the room, a voice cut through. It belonged to Minerva. She was the kind of woman whose presence didn't demand attention, it assumed it. Gray curls pinned perfectly, pearl earrings, the kind of posture only someone raised on etiquette and consequences could maintain. She didn't raise her voice, but it carried. "What you heard tonight," she said, "wasn't just talent. It was truth. And some people in this room should feel ashamed for turning truth into entertainment." A silence thicker than the one before swallowed everything. My heart thudded once, not in fear, but in recognition. Someone to my right nodded. Another guest whispered, "She's right." Zinnia stood frozen, her expression flat, her jaw tightening so slowly it looked mechanical. I didn't move. I didn't need to. Minerva had spoken, and it echoed louder than anything I could have said. Then another voice, familiar, in a way that made my stomach tighten. Elgin. He stepped forward from near the tech station by the wall. We'd known each other since high school orchestra, he on trumpet, me on piano. We hadn't spoken much in years, but the connection had never soured. "There's something you should all see," he said, holding a small flash drive between his fingers. Zinnia shifted. I could almost feel the electricity arc through her spine. "Elgin," she said quickly, too brightly. "I don't think knows the—" But he was already at the projector. The screen dropped slowly, noiselessly, like a curtain being drawn for an act nobody had planned. The lights dimmed just slightly as the video started. It was old footage, grainy, unpolished. My voice could be heard faintly in the background, warming up for my scholarship audition. And then Zinnia's voice came in, crisp and unfiltered. She thinks this piece is going to get her in. It's laughable. Honestly, if I hadn't helped rework her essay, she wouldn't have made the first cut. Another cut played this time, a voice memo. Her voice again. Shell crash. Just wait. I didn't even send the follow-up. Let them think it went missing. Gasps. Not loud, but enough. Someone in the front row covered their mouth. Orson, still standing near Zinnia, dropped his glass with a sharp shatter that no one dared react to. Zinnia's face drained of its practiced ease. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then said, "This is edited. This isn't real." "That's taken completely out of no," Elgin said, calm as stone. "It's not." For a beat, all I could hear was the soft humming of the projector as the screen went black. One woman gathered her clutch and walked out. Another followed. Then a small ripple of others moved toward the exit. Quiet but firm, like they'd suddenly remembered better places to be. A man near the back muttered, "She's not who I thought she was." Zinnia's fingers twitched by her sides, as if looking for something to hold on to. She looked at me, not pleading, not furious, just exposed. I still hadn't said a word. I didn't need to. Everything had already been spoken, and not by me. My father stood stiffly near the wall, one hand gripping the edge of a table. His eyes didn't meet mine, but for the first time, they didn't settle on Zinnia either. She turned to me, voice low and frayed. "You planned this, didn't you?" I tilted my head, offering no answer. Elgin moved beside me, gaze steady. "No, Zinnia," he said. "You did. Years ago. After the video stopped, after the truths were no longer just mine to carry, the room fell into that uneasy hush people mistake for respect. A few claps had faltered, but mostly it was the scraping of chairs, the awkward clearing of throats, the sound of people deciding whether to stay or slip out. I stood near the edge of the ballroom, not seeking attention, just watching. Zinnia sat alone now, eyes flickering, hands still folded too neatly in her lap. Her silence wasn't the silence of regret. It was the silence of someone rewriting, recalibrating. I knew that silence, and seen her use it like armor my whole life. She was already thinking 3 steps ahead, how to twist the narrative, how to cast herself again as the misunderstood heroine. But something had shifted. This time, no one was rushing to feed her the lines. No one was offering a script. I turned slightly toward the gift table. It had been arranged with all the curated charm. Zinnia loved white roses, soft uplighting, pastel ribbons on every box. I wasn't looking for fanfare. Just the small envelope I'd tucked into the pile earlier that evening. It had been pale blue with a gold trim. Our mother's favorite colors. Inside was something more than a gift. A framed photo from a sun-bleached summer. The two of us as children, in matching striped swimsuits, sticky with popsicle juice, sitting on the dock while our mother's laughter echoed behind the camera. That photo had lived on my nightstand since high school. Giving it to Zinnia tonight wasn't about sentiment, it was a challenge. A quiet dare. Remember? Before everything became performance. Before you learned how applause could replace love. But the envelope was gone. In its place sat a lavender-scented candle, wrapped in shiny cellophane and tied with a ribbon. A tag dangled delicately from the bow, written in cursive. From Adelpha. Adelpha? I hadn't brought a candle. I didn't know anyone named Adelpha. And I certainly hadn't wrapped anything that smelled like bath salts and synthetic flowers. I flagged down a nearby server, his tray still trembling slightly from the weight of what had just unfolded. "Excuse me," I said gently. "Do you know what happened to the gift I left earlier?" He hesitated, blinking. "Oh, Miss Zinnia said the original got damaged. She replaced it so you wouldn't feel left out." Wouldn't feel left out. I stared at the candle. Not in anger, not even shock. Just a hollow stillness that only comes when the betrayal is so petty it's almost elegant. She hadn't just erased the gift. She replaced my memory with a placeholder, a scented decoy. And that's when Callie stood up. She was younger, barely into her 20s, my cousin, who had always hung back in the corners of family gatherings, a silent observer. But tonight, she found her voice. "We all know this isn't the first time Zinnia's twisted things to look good," she said, her voice carrying farther than she probably intended. Heads snapped. Conversations stopped. Her mother, Aunt Darlene, turned sharply in her seat, the lines around her mouth etched like they'd been carved in stone. "Callie, sit! Now!" Callie faltered. Her jaw trembled. And then she obeyed, sinking back down, her words swallowed by fear, by decades of silence trained into us all. And still, the hush remained. Thicker than applause, heavier than any toast. I looked back at the table at that stupid candle and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Then I moved. Not toward Zinnia. Not toward the microphone or the spotlight or the crowd. Toward the table. The real gift was still in my bag. I'd brought it with me because I knew something would happen. I pulled the candle from its place, dropped it into the trash bin without ceremony. Then I reached into my purse and took out the photo, still in the blue and gold paper, still mine. I placed it gently on the table. No announcement, no pointed look, just truth, returned to its rightful place. There was a Ripley, sharp intake of breath here, a whispered gasp there. One woman covered her mouth with both hands. A man near the dessert tray shook his head slowly, as if realizing the cost of every polite silence he'd ever upheld. A single clap echoed from the back, unsure, hesitant. Then another joined it, but it didn't build. It stopped, as if even that felt too raw. I heard Zinnia inhale like she might speak, like she might retake control. But no words came. Her facesso, polished, so practiced, had cracked. Not shattered, just enough to show the seams underneath. And in this room full of mirrors and memories, that was enough. I didn't look at her. I turned to the rest. "I didn't come here to ruin anything," I said, my voice low, steady. But I'm done being quiet just so others can keep pretending. Then I walked. Not toward the front doors, not toward escape, but down the side hallway, where the air felt easier to breathe. I wasn't fleeing. I was reclaiming. Behind me, murmurs rose not about me, but about each other, about what they had ignored, about what they had accepted. And in that way, I think the silence broke more than just one illusion. Then her voice came after me. Zinnia's. Controlled, but sharp. If you keep going like this, she called, don't expect anyone to come with you. I paused, only for a breath. Then I kept walking, and didn't look back. The buzz of the ballroom felt miles away, even though it was just a few feet behind me. I found an empty side room. Maybe it was meant for bridal parties or coat check. It didn't matter, it was quiet. For the first time all night, I could hear myself breathe. I sat on a velvet chair by the far wall, the kind that looked comfortable, but was never meant to be sat in long. My body sank into it anyway, not from fatigue, but from release. I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. The fire had burned bright, and now I was just still. The door opened gently. A server stepped in, holding a small white envelope. Someone left this for you at the gift table, he said. Thanks, I said, taking it with a small nod. He disappeared as quickly as he came. The handwriting was elegant, a little shaky. I knew it before I even unfolded the flap. Minerva. Inside, just a short note on thick paper. I stayed quiet once, too. It cost me years. You spoke for both of us. That was it. I didn't cry, but my eyes closed and my fingers tightened around the edges. I folded it once, tucked it into my clutch, and stood. From the end of the hallway, I peered through the curtain. Zinnia stood near the dessert table, her arm around someone's waist, but her posture was stiff. Orson was gone. Several guests had left quietly. The fake smiles and polite chatter that remained sounded brittle, like thin glass. Wardle was by the corner, sipping from a glass he hadn't touched all night. Even from here, I could tell it was still full. It wasn't just the performance or the video that unsettled them. It was the realization that what they had believed, what they had chosen to believe, wasn't the full picture, and they didn't know what to do with that. I stepped back into the light. Conversations dimmed as I passed through the crowd. Not completely, but enough that my presence nudged something open. I didn't rush. I didn't lower my gaze. Zinnia turned when I neared the table. I saw the flicker in her face, like she expected me to say something, maybe apologize or explain. Instead, I reached for the gift I'd placed earlier. The frame. The one with our mother, our childhood, our bare feet in the grass. I put it back in my purse. You don't get to rewrite this one, I said, voice low but firm. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. There was nothing left for her to control. I walked toward the exit. Near the door, a young woman, someone I hadn't spoken to all night, touched my arm. That was brave, she said. Just thought you should hear it. I nodded, offering a small smile that felt genuine, not forced. Thank you, I said, and meant it. Outside, the air was cooler than I remembered. The city lights bled into the sky, dulling the stars but not erasing them. I stood for a moment, breathing in the quiet. This silence was mine. Not suffocating, not imposed, just mine. I headed toward my car, each step easier than the last. As I reached for the handle, my phone buzzed. A text. Studio visit confirmed. Tuesday, 10 a.m. Looking forward to hearing more. I stared at the screen for a beat, then slipped the phone back into my bag and smiled, not because they were waiting, but because I wasn't anymore. Morning sun spilled across my kitchen floor, soft and golden, touching the piano bench before it reached my toes. It hadn't looked this gentle in months. Maybe it never changed. Maybe I had. I sat on the edge of the bench, not to play, just to feel the familiar texture beneath my palms. The keys felt less like pressure now, and more like presence. I didn't press them, just rested there. It was enough. That piano had been closed for too long out of fear, out of grief, out of not knowing what the point would be if nobody was listening. But now, I didn't need an audience. The silence wasn't oppressive. It was mine. The days since the party blurred together, but not in a bad way. I remembered the applause, but more than that, I remembered the quiet afterward. How it didn't feel like defeat or emptiness, but relief. That kind of stillness stays with you. And Minerva's note, I had read it 3 times since that night. Maybe more. Some guests reached out. A few sent flowers, though I didn't ask for them. A couple left voicemails. I listened to them all, once, then deleted them without replying. Zinnia hadn't called. She hadn't texted. No message. Not even a passive-aggressive quote reposted for me to decode. Just silence. And for once, I wasn't watching for her shadow in every notification. I had a studio session yesterday. The place smelled like old carpet and coffee grounds. The engineer was kind, unhurried. He didn't ask why I'd waited so long. He just looked at me when I finished and said, "You ready for the next take?" I was. And I wasn't. But I nodded anyway. It didn't have to be perfect. It just had to be mine. 2 days ago, Wardle sent me a photo. No caption. Just an major old piano, still in the corner of the house I grew up in. The light from the window caught the edges of the lid. I stared at it for a long time, unsure whether it was an apology or just an archive. I didn't respond. Some olive branches aren't meant to be picked up right away. This morning, I made coffee slowly. No rush. I opened the porch door and let the breeze in. Fall in Austin has this brief, perfect moment between humid and cold, where the wind smells like cinnamon and dry leaves, and you can almost pretend time isn't moving as fast as it is. I took Minerva's letter with me. The paper had a crease now, the ink smudged slightly in one corner. From the night I first read it, when I didn't mean to cry, but did anyway. I read it again. I stayed quiet once, too. It cost me years. You spoke for both of us. I didn't smile this time. I closed my eyes, breathed, and let the silence settle in my chest. This silence didn't mean retreat. It meant space. Maybe I'd see Zinnia again, maybe not. If we crossed paths, there wouldn't be fireworks or apologies. I didn't need either. I wasn't waiting for justice anymore. I'd already found something better. My phone buzzed. "We've got your time slot. Tuesday, 10 a.m. Can't wait to hear what you bring next." I stared at the message. Let the words breathe before I tucked the phone back in my sweater pocket. I didn't leave that night to prove a point. I left to begin again. And that's exactly what I'm doing.